and welcome to another episode on the Motherhood Circle video series. I'm Ashley, I'm your host, and I'm really thrilled that you're here again with me this week. I've got an amazing guest on today, Naomi, and she's a lactation consultant. So we're talking all things breastfeeding. We talk about what we can do as mothers to set ourselves up in pregnancy so that we can have the breastfeeding journey that we want, so we can have the support and the education and everything that goes with that. We talk about colostrum, which is the first milk, and also talk about how long it takes for the first real milk to come in as well. We talk about some of the ways we can support ourselves, who we can get to come in and help us, how we can advocate for ourselves. It's really jam-packed session of breastfeeding, and I think it's amazing. So as I always say, sit down, snuggle up, get a cup of coffee, get a cup of tea, and enjoy this session. Naomi is an RN and IBCLC with her own private practice in the northern suburbs of Brisbane. She recently attained a Master's in Public Health and has led a national assessment of Australia's infant feeding policies and practices. Naomi has 2 teenage children and a Ridgeback puppy who keeps her on her toes. Naomi feels very passionate about supporting families to breastfeed their babies as long as they wish and ensuring they have the information they need to make their own decisions. Hi Naomi, and welcome to the Motherhood Circle video series. I am so happy you're here because today we're going to be talking about one of my favourite topics ever, breastfeeding. So welcome.
Morning Ashley, how are you?
Really good, thanks. How are you going?
Yeah, I'm great, thanks. It's really good to be here.
Great. So today we're going to be talking about, like, one of the first questions I wanted to ask you is, because there's so much involved in breastfeeding, but I wanted to know how a mother can prepare herself before she gives birth to her baby.
That is such a good question, Ashley, because I find that usually when a mum is pregnant, and I even remember myself when I was pregnant, that I was just so focused on the birth and how I was going to get this baby out and wondering what would happen. And, you know, it's all such a mystery. But then what can happen is the baby is born and then all of the birth is over and you're left sort of wondering, oh, okay, now how am I going to feed this baby? And often we're discharged from hospital really quickly as well. So that support and information is missing very early in the piece. So some of the things that you can do while you're pregnant or even before pregnancy is arm yourself with as much information as possible. So the ways that you can do that, I think the easiest way, firstly, is if you're in an area where they're provided a breastfeeding education class with the Australian Breastfeeding Association is the perfect opportunity to kickstart generally 4-hour session run by trained breastfeeding counsellors. And as well as that 4-hour session, you also receive a book, Breastfeeding Naturally, so which basically covers everything you need to know about breastfeeding in very simple information. If you have access as well, you could have an antenatal consultation with a lactation consultant just to discuss the things that can happen at birth and the things that happen immediately after that impact on your breastfeeding relationship. And then just trying to be around as many women as possible that are breastfeeding without being a stalker. So yeah,
I have to jump in there, Naomi, because look, I've got my book.
Yeah.
Is this the new one or is your one the new one?
Yeah, I've been around for a while, so mine's the old edition. I was looking for the new one, but I think I've lent it to someone.
I love this book, and I actually was reading it the other day because I am doing my segment on breastfeeding at the moment, and obviously I'm not an expert, but I feel like I'm a bit of a mother expert from my own experiences. But there's so much information in here that even if you, like, obviously I recommend doing the course because the course is amazing. I did it myself with my second baby, and it helped me actually understand where I went wrong with my first baby by supplementing and topping up and that sort of stuff. But this book alone is just like actually amazing, like the amount of information that's in there. So I'm really glad that you brought that up, because I really love the ABA and also this book.
Yeah, so if you aren't able to go along to a breastfeeding education class and you would like that book, that is available to purchase separately on the ABA website. They have a shop on there, so you can purchase that book without going to a class.
Mm.
And just seeing breastfeeding, because I think one of the biggest issues we have in our society these days is that there are less women breastfeeding, particularly in public, or past that 2 or 3 month mark when they're more out and about. So we just don't see breastfeeding incidentally as much as what might have happened, say, 100 years ago, or you could even, if you go back thousands of years, all the women would sit around and support mothers in those first few months after birth. And so that's when the younger women in the family would watch and learn. And we're often isolated these days, so we don't get to see breastfeeding as much.
So true. And I remember, like, even now when I go out and I see a breastfeeding mum, I always look at her adoringly, you know, but a lot of the time they're wearing covers and hiding or going to a nursing room so that we're away from people. And I know that in other cultures, because that's just Western culture and how we've set up ourselves, that it's not okay to breastfeed in public, but it is okay. And then other cultures around the world, it's just totally normal to have a baby latched on your boob and your boob be out and you're walking around, and it's totally normal. It's totally like, it's almost like this is an amazing thing that you're giving your baby. And then in our culture, it's the complete opposite. You know, women have different experiences and, you know, I even felt a little bit embarrassed. But then I kept saying to myself in my head, you're doing another woman justice by showing her and showing other children as well. I often had like little babies come up and say, what are you doing? And their mums would be horrified. And I'd say, it's okay. Like, you know, I want them to see this. This is normal and natural.
Yeah, absolutely. And whilst feeding rooms and shopping centres are a great service to mothers, particularly if you're having difficulty feeding or if you have a toddler who's running around and you need to keep them contained while you're feeding, that's great. But unfortunately, it also sends the message that feeding mothers should be hidden away, and that's not really the case. Of course, it's completely legal to breastfeed wherever your baby needs to be fed, and no one can ever ask you to go and breastfeed somewhere else.
That's good, isn't it? There's some really amazing tips that you've shared with us here, Naomi. I think recapping over that, so we had the ABA breastfeeding class, we had being around women who breastfeed, and also the ABA Breastfeeding Association also has free groups and meetings you can go to while you're pregnant, and also when you've got your new baby, so you can actually be around women and get that knowledge and support. And they're totally free, aren't they?
That's right. Of course, it's always great if you can become a member, which then supports the association to operate. So not completely free, but you can attend the first few without joining, yes.
Mm-hmm. So what about when a mum has her baby and, you know, how can she support her baby's ability to breastfeed once the baby's born?
Okay. Well, that can vary, of course, depending on what happens in the birth. So let's assume that everything has gone well and the baby is well, mother is well. The main priority is skin to skin and to keep the mother and baby together for as long as possible without interruption. This is because, and this often isn't talked about, but babies are actually born very, very clever and very, very strong, way more than what we actually give them credit for. They have built into them a whole set of primitive neonatal reflexes that basically enable them to find the breast and to latch on and feed with very little assistance whatsoever. Of course, humans have their babies very early in the piece compared to other mammals. So a human mother needs to support her baby a little bit more than what other mammals might need to. I mean, if you think of cats and dogs, for example, the mother just lies there while the puppies and kittens scurry around and latch on and feed, and the mother does nothing, basically. But a human mother needs to give that baby some support and security so that he or she can do what they need to do. So skin to skin. Sometimes in hospitals, unfortunately, it's a requirement that the baby is weighed very early. And this is, from my understanding, and I haven't checked lately to see if this is still the case, but my understanding is that a baby doesn't actually exist until they've been weighed. So staff in a hospital can't add that baby into the system unless they have a weight. So this is the reason why babies need to be weighed so quickly in the piece after a birth. But you can ask for the baby not to be weighed until the baby has latched on and had its first feed, and that's the ideal circumstance. Once a baby has been taken away from the mother, the problem with weighing as well is they're placed on their back, which often then they get the startle reflex, and it just adds a little bit of stress into their life that maybe isn't necessary. Other thing,
sorry, I'll just cut in there. I have heard in a lot of doula groups, I'm in a lot of birthing groups, and they always suggest, like, as one of the things that you request that the baby gets weighed, even after the first 24 hours. I don't know the hospital protocol or anything, but you can at least advocate. I'm not sure if they can actually force anything, but it just, like you said, it allows you to grab your baby straight away and just allow that natural latch to happen and for you to create that bond straight away. Because the first 24 hours is the most important, and at least the first hour, isn't it, to be bonding with our baby and to be close with our baby.
Yeah, well, we know that the more often a baby latches and feeds in those first 24 to 48 hours, the better your milk supply will be down the track at 3 months, for example. So the main aim in those first few days is to feed, basically whenever the baby moves. Now, after the baby is born, they'll often, they can take up to an hour or so to have their first feed, and then they will most likely fall asleep, and they are then usually very sleepy for the next 6 or so hours. If the baby doesn't have a feed for a variety of reasons in that first 6 hours, it's crucial that there is someone there who can support the mother to hand express, to just get that colostrum going and also have the colostrum to provide for the baby. The amounts that are expressed or that the baby drinks in those first few days are very, very small. Now, I don't know if you'll see this, but there's a marble. I'll try and put it on a different background. But a very small marble, that is a visual representation of the size of a newborn baby's tummy. So they really only need a couple of mils. So if you are in that situation where you are having to hand express and you're only getting a few drops or maybe a mil, that is okay. That is all they need. Babies are born with brown fat on the back of their neck that they actually metabolize until over those first few days before your milk actually comes in. So they're not starving, they're not dehydrating, they are just doing what they're supposed to do, just so long as they have access to your colostrum, whether that's actually latching onto the breast or via expressed colostrum. So yes, just to summarise, skin to skin is absolutely crucial. The other thing about skin to skin is that it regulates the baby. It regulates their temperature, it regulates their heart rate, and is soothing for them and allows those reflexes to kick in. Now,
it also gives mum and the baby that oxytocin boost that you're talking about that regulates everything, doesn't it?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. It works for the mother as well. And we've seen under imaging that after birth, the mother's chest is the warmest part of her body. So that's not by accident, that's just perfect biological design. And that's why the skin to skin on the chest is the best spot for the baby after they're born. If for some reason, for example, if the mother is needing suturing or has had a general anaesthetic and isn't awake yet, then dad is also a great option for skin to skin. So yeah, even partners in the theatre can be a perfect opportunity for skin to skin if mum's not available.
I think that's important to mention as well, is that, you know, often mothers are taken away from their babies if they're having surgeries. Sometimes they're away from their babies for a few hours. So in that circumstance, dad can actually take his shirt off or pop baby in there and get all that goodness for both him and baby and start that bonding process as well. I know my husband, I was actually away from my baby for like the first 4 or 5 hours, and she was with my husband, and they have a wonderful bond. And I put it down to the fact that she was with him for the first 5 hours of her life, and he was, you know, holding her and doing everything with her, which just makes me feel so warm inside when I think about that.
Yeah, and that's absolutely right. Obviously, for all the breastfeeding purposes and hormonal purposes, it's ideal if it's the mum, but another close person is important as well, because the baby will recognise their voice, and as mammals, they desire and need to be held. So definitely a familiar sounding voice and chest is the next best option, rather than being placed in a cot on their own, because what we have to remember is when a baby's born, they're transitioning from the nice, warm, cozy, dark uterus, and where they could hear their mother's heartbeat, they could hear their mother's voice. And when they're born, they're out in the bright lights, the cold air. There's loud noises, unfamiliar voices, unfamiliar smells. So being held is really where they need to be.
So baby's born, what can mum expect over the first couple of days, basically, with her baby?
Yeah, okay, so as I alluded to before, it could take an hour or so for the baby to find the breast and initiate a feed. Try not to rush or pressure them too much before that. Just let them take their time. And then they'll often be quite sleepy. They need to recover from the birth just like a mum does. So they may sleep for 6 or so hours. And then basically from that point on, it's really just responding to their cues, keeping them close to you. So if not skin to skin, at least in the cot or bassinet next to you, where you can see them. And the first signs of hunger or looking for a feed is when the baby, they'll wake and open their eyes, and they'll often start turning their head from side to side, bringing their hands up to their mouth, and looking for a breast, basically, because like I said, they think they're being held. So they'll turn their head from side to side thinking there's going to be a boob just there. So if there's not, that's when they'll start to make noises, and crying is generally the last sign of hunger. So if you can have them close to you and give them access to the breast before they're crying, they'll have a much greater chance of being able to latch well, because they're not stressed and not crying. When a baby is crying, their tongue is actually lifting up to the roof of their mouth, and it makes it really hard for them to latch. So trying to get them to the breast before they get to that stressed situation. And I guess that's something that can impact on that is all the visitors that you get. Often get so many family and friends that just want to come and congratulate you and be a part of your happiness and meet the baby. and they'll want to have a cuddle. But this can often hinder the breastfeeding process in those first few days, because they often are less likely to cry if they're being held and passed around. But also it can make it difficult for you as a new mum to practice breastfeeding when you're still not feeling 100% confident with it. If there's visitors in the room, you might delay offering your baby a feed because there's visitors there. So I think it's a good idea before your baby's born to have a chat with your partner and come up with a plan for how you're going to handle that. I do know of some people, I don't know if I could ever do this, but some people don't even tell anyone that their baby's born until day 2 or day 3, just to ward off, keep those visitors at bay for the first few days and just have that special time bonding together. I mean, of course, you could tell your mum and dad if you like, but not letting it out to the wider circle of friends until you're ready. There's no rule that says you have to tell everyone when the baby's born.
No.
And if you don't want to do that, if you don't feel comfortable doing that, then just having a plan with your partner saying, look, if I give you this special sign, can you please just give everyone a hint that it's time to go and that baby needs a feed.
Yeah, I think those conversations are really important. When I had my second baby, because when I had my first baby, we had people come up in the first couple of hours because we were really excited and happy for everyone to meet the baby, and I was vomiting, and the people that came were very loud. I was in a tiny shared room. They were moving things around. It was making me feel really uncomfortable, and I just wasn't in my best shape. So when we had the second baby, I said, I don't want anyone coming to the hospital. So I told my parents, I told my sisters and everyone, I said, we'll have visitors when we get home or when we want to. And they weren't too happy about it, but at the end of the day, I needed to make sure that I was going to be okay and my baby was going to be okay. And, we just invited them up whenever it was comfortable for us. So I think having those conversations and working out what you're comfortable with and having those boundaries, and also, like you said, have a little code word so you can give your partner the look, take them out for a walk. I need a little bit of time here. I think that's really good as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So going back to what to expect over the first few days as well, is it's really normal for your for the mature milk, for your full milk supply not to come in until about day 3 or even day 4. There are some factors that will impede that. For example, if you've had a highly instrumental birth or a cesarean, that can, but not always, delay your milk coming in for a day or 2. So just bearing that in mind as well. But in that instance, it just means putting your baby to the breast a little bit more frequently, just to increase that amount of colostrum that they get, and also increase the stimulation to the breast. Telling them, yes, there's a baby, yes, please start making milk. Every time the baby goes to the breast, that sends a signal to the brain that, yes, we want to make milk, we need milk. And every bit that the baby removes, your body will replace. In fact, your body is driven to replace it. It's only other things that we do that might hinder that process. By about the end of day 2 and going into day 3, your baby will often be a lot more alert and seem quite irritable and not very sleepy, because they're getting to that point where they're ready for your milk to come in. It doesn't mean that anything has gone wrong. It doesn't mean that your baby is starving or dehydrated. It's just that lull before the milk comes in, and you just, it's just a matter of hanging in there, giving the baby access to the breast, and things will all fall into place within the next couple of days.
I always love it when that milk comes in. I don't know, it's just because the baby can get so much more, and it's just not that I stress for the first couple of days, because I'm well aware of the process, But it just, once it happens, it just feels so much more calmer, and, you know, the baby can get so much more. And so, and I think the thing is with mothers don't, especially first-time mothers, a lot of the time aren't aware that the first milk is the colostrum, and that the milk doesn't come in for the first. It can be up to the first 5 days or whatever. And so, you know, a lot of the questions that I see, especially in the mothers groups, is, you know, my baby's not getting enough. And then, so I think having that diagram of how much they actually need, that the first couple of days is colostrum, then the milk comes in, the more you put your baby on your boob, the more you're sending that signal to the body. So I would repeat the mantra, if in doubt, whip it out. So basically, whenever my baby moved, I'd be like, okay, bring her over here, let's put her on the boob, you know, because I knew the more she sucked, the more she was telling my body, make more milk, make more milk. As I grow, I'm going to need more milk. So I was always happy to allow her access to my breast to keep bringing that milk in, because I knew it was the best thing for her and for me to get that milk going.
That's right. I think there's also a bit of fear amongst some women that they're creating bad habits or spoiling their baby, but in reality, you cannot spoil a newborn baby.
Yeah.
They just need to be held, fed, and loved and responded to. You couldn't possibly spoil a newborn baby. It's just not possible, and you're not going to create bad habits. You know, they do need to feed frequently in those first few weeks, you know, up to 3 or 4 months. Breast milk is designed to be easily digestible because our gastrointestinal systems are the last system of the body to mature. It takes 6 to 9 months. And so they need something gentle that's easy to digest. The other reason is it's a survival mechanism, not so relevant in this day and age, but the reason behind it is the more often the baby needs to feed, the closer they are to their mother. So it's a safe mechanism, because the other system that's also immature is the respiratory system. So we don't want newborn babies going into a deep sleep, because that will impede their respiratory drive. We need them just gently asleep, not in a deep sleep. So breast milk is perfectly designed to keep babies safe and to be gentle on their gastrointestinal system until they're ready to digest and absorb other things down the track. The other thing that can be concerning in the first few days, particularly around day 3 when they have their next weigh, is weight gains or weight losses. So there is quite a bit of, so I'll just explain. Babies are weighed at birth generally, and then they're weighed again on day 3. That's the usual routine. And what can happen is they'll often have lost weight. In fact, in most cases, they will lose weight. That's because they're born, while they're in utero, they're sharing a circulatory system with their mother. So they have a lot of extra fluid on board. If you have a birth where you need to have IV fluids, that can also inflate the amount of fluids that they have in their system when they're born. And of course, fluid equals weight. So when they're weighed at birth, that's going to include that extra fluid, and they lose all of that in the first few days. So the more intervention you have at birth, generally, the greater weight loss that baby's going to have by day 3. Hospitals work on a general cutoff of 10%.
Yeah.
So that's usually the magic figure. I wish it was a bit higher than that, but my other wish would be that babies just weren't weighed at birth. And there is research to back that up, that the most ideal timing for the first weigh is actually around 48 to 72 hours, not at birth. So often what can happen is if a baby's lost more than 10%, then in a hospital system it may be recommended that you top your baby up or supplement with formula. You can always ask to supplement with express breast milk if you're able to if you're able to express some milk at that time. Of course, expressing isn't easy for everyone, so it doesn't always work, but that is an option. You can always say, well, can I try express breast milk first before we introduce any formula?
And also having that knowledge and awareness, because when I had my first baby, I came out of hospital day 2, went home, had a really bad night of latching. She had undiagnosed highs throughout the whole thing, and we had problems latching, and I didn't really know what I was doing. I was just trying to get this baby to get on my boob, and like you said, we when she was born, I didn't actually do it myself. The nurse came along and popped the baby on my boob, and so I never actually really learnt how to latch her myself. So we had a horrible night, and then the health nurse came the next morning, and we had our bags packed because we knew that she was starving and that I was struggling. My boobs were bloodied and sore, and so I was going to go to an appointment. But the health nurse came. She heard the baby screaming. My baby had a big set of lungs in her when she was born. She came in, fluffled, weighed the baby, said, oh my God, she's lost 10% or whatever. You know, she was a big baby when she was born. She did have fluids. I wasn't aware of that. You know, if your baby has fluids, they're going to be heavier. And so she sent my husband out to get formula and boiled some bottles on the stove. And I felt powerless, out of control. I didn't feel like I had an option at all. I was just doing what I was told. But it also took away my confidence to breastfeed. So from that point on, my milk came in a couple hours later, but she never sat down with me, explained the process or anything, or even showed me how to latch my baby. She just left me with this formula. I didn't want to formula feed my baby. It wasn't something that I ever was part of my plan. And then I lost my confidence in breastfeeding. So I expressed for 6 weeks, which is very hard to do. It's very challenging. And then after 6 weeks, I was like, okay, I'm over this. It's really hard. I'm sick of cleaning bottles, sick of sitting there pumping my boobs. You're going to breastfeed now. And she was older. Her mouth was, you know, easier to latch, but she became a really lazy feeder. And so she was used to the milk pouring in from the bottle. So she would only latch when my milk letdown was happening for like the first minute. And then she would get cranky and cry. So then I would give her formula or express milk because I didn't know what else to do and I just wanted my baby to be fed. So I just wanted to put that in there, is that if we're not aware that our babies can have a 10% loss, or there's, you know, that we can actually say, you know what, maybe I don't want to give my baby formula. Maybe I want to focus on getting this latch right, getting the milk, let the milk come in first. Because I'm sure if my milk came in a couple of hours later, I sat down with her and actually learned how to latch properly, she would have been putting on that weight perfectly fine because I had an abundance of milk. It just was the lack of knowledge and lack of support for me. And I know that many mothers share that same story. So I just wanted to share that as well so that women can advocate for themselves and say, look, you know, I think this is what's best for my baby, but thank you very much. And this is what we're going to do.
Absolutely. And that's where being informed before the baby's born can really make a difference, because in those first few days, you're just so vulnerable, exhausted and stressed that if you hit a hurdle like that, it's really hard to stand up and, you know, either ask for more support or question something that a health professional is telling you. So, as well as having that pre-information before you have your baby, in those instances, yes, it's good to know that it's possible that they can lose weight. But if you're concerned that your baby isn't latching well, or you've already got damaged and sore nipples, that's when you really need to seek help from someone who knows enough about breastfeeding to be able to help you. Not
like a lactation consultant. So tell me about how you, a lactation consultant, because I didn't even know what a lactation consultant was. I was under the impression that the midwife would have all the training needed, or the health nurse would have all the training needed. So I would have really appreciated having an experienced, calm lactation consultant by my side to reassure me and tell me. So tell me more about a lactation consultant and how they can help us.
Okay, so lactation consultants are usually health professionals, but not always. Some have come through community-based training. But to become a lactation consultant, you have to have done quite a lot of education. So you need to have experience with mother-to-mother support, whether that's as a midwife or a child health nurse or a community-based peer supporter, like an ABA counsellor, for example. You need to have, it's 1,000 hours of experience of that. Plus, if you don't already have a health professional qualification, like as a midwife or a registered nurse or physio, speech therapist, GP, there's many professions that do actually become lactation consultants. So if you don't have that health professional qualification, then you must go and complete some university level anatomy and physiology, and there's 14 subjects you need to have completed. Then you have to apply to be able to do the exam, and if you're successful, then you have to complete, you do a full day exam, and that is ran all around the world on the same day, twice a year. So it's an international qualification. So that's how you become a lactation consultant. So as you can see, it's quite a bit of work and quite involved. So if you were interested in what a lactation consultant actually does, so some work in hospitals. So there are quite a few maternity hospitals that will employ or will have midwives on their team that have the IBCLC qualification. That stands for International Board Certified Lactation Consultant. So that's the gold standard. That's what you're looking for if you want to consult with a lactation consultant. So as I said, hospitals will have them on their team, but also in the community, there are IBCLCs that work in private practice, and they either have an office or clinic, or they will come and do home visits. So they'll come and see you in your home. It varies from LC to LC. When I do a lactation consult, I will come to your home. I will spend the first 5 to 10 minutes or even longer sometimes, depending, just getting the story. You know, what happened at birth? What's happened since then? How have you been feeding? I ask about weight gains. I ask about nappies. And then I will do an oral assessment. I check the baby's mouth just so that I'm sure that there is or isn't a tongue tie, which that's a whole nother topic. We won't go into that today. And then I'll watch you feed, and then I'll make some recommendations, and we'll come up with a plan. And we do that together. It's not me saying you must or you're doing that wrong. We come up with a plan that will work for you and your baby, depending on what your goals are as well. It's not about me. It's not about my goals. It's about you and your goals with your baby and what you're comfortable with doing. And I'm there to provide you with information, but also to support you to achieve your goals.
And a lactation consultant supported me with my second baby. We had a couple of appointments, and she sat with me, and it was just so relaxed. And to know that you're actually seeing someone who's specialised in breastfeeding, and this is something they do every single day, and that they're fully trained on, is just reassuring as well. And I think that you were saying before that you have a special offer for our viewers. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
That's right, yes. So if you would like a consultation with me, I'm based in Brisbane, but I can do Skype or Zoom consultations if it's appropriate as well. Obviously, I wouldn't be able to do an oral assessment in that situation, depending on what the issue is. But for an initial consultation or an antenatal consultation, I'm happy to give viewers of this video series a $15 discount on their first consultation. So just mention this video if you ring up to make a booking with me. And I think Ashley has all my contact details that she'll share with you.
Awesome. So what I'll do is I'll share them in the description if you're on YouTube watching this, and it will also be on my website too, so you can get in contact with Naomi. So thank you so much, Naomi. I think we could have talked for hours in regards to this topic. There's so much to know. But I'm so I know. Thank you so much for coming on. It's been awesome.
No worries. Thank you, Ashley.
Thanks for watching this episode. Make sure you subscribe to this YouTube channel, our mailing list, and follow us on our social channels so you never miss an episode. All our details are listed in the description box in YouTube. I look forward to bringing you another great episode next week. Welcome to our circle of support, Mama, with the Motherhood Circle. See you next week. With love, Ashley.